Okay, welcome back. This is video number 3, and I'm going to just move my slide back and forth for a second because the last time, once again, I had a little bit of confusion where it wasn't on the very first slide I was on right at the beginning. Didn't cause as much trouble, but I wanted to make sure that this time around it started properly. And so for this one, we're going to go through the 10 slide reactions. First video, we went through 6 identifications and the other 6 identifications. The slide reactions, if you remember, are where I show you images of artwork that you're not expected to know, and you only need to know, like you need to figure out one thing about it. So in this particular case, just saying it's a work of sculpture would be enough. And there are more things you could have said, like you might have remembered that it was Roman, that it was late Roman, that it led into, like we see aspects of it that remind us of early Christian artwork, so there helps show a continuity. And but also that we talked about this particular one in terms of some of the exceptions to the rule of what is freestanding and what is in the round. Like this particular piece is kind of in the round, but not freestanding. It's not freestanding because it's attached to a building, but it's kind of in the round because you can walk around it. So it's some kind of in-between example between high relief and in the round sculpture. Okay. So this painting by Duccio, what are some of the things you could say? Number one, you could say it was a painting. You could also talk about its use of symmetry. What kind of symmetry? Of axial symmetry. Now, I don't mean that it's perfectly axially symmetrical, because after all, the figure of Madonna right here in the center, right, that, her pose is not completely symmetrical, and the figure of Jesus in her lap is certainly not symmetrical. But in terms of the general organization of two figures here in similar poses, then these figures here and these figures here, like things are kind of paired up in these kind of symmetrical organizations. So, William the Faience Hippo, what are some of the things you could say? Well, you can mention that it's small, it's an intimate. We talked about this in terms of scale. We were talking about small, intimate scale. It is actually a work of ceramics, but if you described it as ceramics or sculpture, either would be acceptable. It is technically what's called faience, which is where it's a type of clay that's then has a blue kind of slip painted over it using crushed lapis lazuli, and it gives it this kind of finish. And why is it called William? No, well, I don't know. It's not all that clear. It's just when it got, I think it's at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and it's just kind of a nickname it acquired. So it's Middle Kingdom, and I think those are some of the main things you could say about it. All right. First thing you would probably notice that this is a form of architecture. You may guess that this is very early Romanesque architecture. We can tell it's Romanesque because it's got this type of rounded arch vaulting, right, but not leading to a barrel vault ceiling or a groin vault ceiling, but to this flat suspended, or not exactly suspended, but a flat crossbeam type ceiling supported by these archways. And yeah, that's probably some, you could describe the arches, and that would be enough. Okay. You might remember this piece because it's shown up in some other things. It was in a comparison question on the previous test. So Henry Moore, for number one thing would be to say that it's a work of sculpture. And then you might also mention that it's in, fully in the round, and that it creates these large negative volumes, negative spaces that invite people to kind of crawl inside it and to explore it. Okay, Birth of Venus. You can mention it's a painting. It is technically a tempera painting. Not sure if I talked about it when we were talking about tempera painting or not, but it is a tempera painting, and it's an example of early Renaissance, kind of towards the end. You can either see it as the beginning of the High Renaissance or the end of the early Renaissance. And anything else about it that would be important to mention? I think that's about it. Okay, Fire Truck by Charles Ray. So it's a work of sculpture, and that would be all you would need to say. But if you remember that it is a functioning fire, vehicle, functioning fire truck type vehicle, and that it drives around, but it is designed to be an exact scaled up version of a toy fire truck, so that and that gives it that kind of weird feeling of both being at one scale, like following the scale rules of things that are small, and yet then it is made to life size, and that feels bizarre and strange. And yeah, there you go. All right, so it's a drawing. This is a drawing by Pontormo. If you said a Renaissance drawing or a Mannerist drawing, you could have gotten some extra credit points. And it's a portrait, and you can see changes of line weight as well as hatching and cross hatching, which follows cross contour lines, as well as some use of tone. But it is primarily a line drawing with changes of line weight. And I'm trying to think if there's any other major things that you might say. That's probably about it. Okay, the Pantheon. Number one, you would mention the dome ceiling, and these two images are of the same building. The only reason why we have a black and white image of the exterior here is because since then there's been more buildings built up around it, so you don't get a clear view of it like we do from this older image. It's not that this is an older building and this is a new building, as I think one person mistakenly assumed. So we have a large dome with an oculus, like I talked about, and the dome is supported by these barrel vaults and archways. And the columns, if you're really carefully looking, are Corinthian columns. And is there any other thing that I think you might get out of it besides mentioning that it is architecture, and that it's Roman, and that you might remember that it is in Rome? Those are some of the main things you could say about it. Okay, and lastly, Rabbit by Jeff Coons is a work of sculpture. You might remember that it is a cast made based off of an actual inflatable, and so it has this kind of irony of being made out of something really solid. I believe that this one is stainless steel, solid and heavy, but it has the look of something that we know is very physically light, like a blow-up balloon. But it is not a blow-up balloon. It is a solid metal sculpture. So it's an example of cast sculpture. It is in the round, although I wouldn't necessarily call it fully in the round, because I think some views are more important than others, but it is freestanding and in the round, and it is an example of cast or indirect sculpture. Okay, all right, I will meet you in video number 4. Thank you very much.